All right there, everyone. James O'Keefe's Project Veritas strikes again with the release of a hidden video showing a black staffer for Florida governor candidate Andrew Gillum saying that Florida is an effed up cracker state. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. Just as a reminder, for a limited time, you can get my book, President Trump and Our Post-Secular Future, for only 99 cents. As an ebook download at the link below, if you want to know why and how President Trump is in fact overturning the political order for decades to come, this is the book for you. It's normally $7.95, but it's now only 99 cents as an ebook download for a limited time at the link below. All right, so if you're not familiar with James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, and I'm sure most of you are, but just in case, they conduct undercover sting operations where they videotape liberals and liberal organizations admitting what they actually believe. And that's, of course, only when they think the cameras are off and there's no longer, the corporatist globalist media around to protect them and give them an air of moral superiority. You may remember the hidden videos of staffers and contributors at CNN completely admitting that the whole Russian collusion story that they were putting forward regarding Donald Trump was a complete and total nothing burger, in the words of Van Jones. They were only pushing it because they found it boosted their ratings on the one hand, while at the same time undermining the Trump presidency on the other. So Project Veritas is a great organization. In fact, they just recently exposed the liberal Democratic Senate candidate Kyrsten Sinema in Arizona to be an utter fraud. She admitted that she had to hide her extremist political views from the citizens of Arizona in order to get elected. And so now Project Veritas has released a new video showing a high-ranking staffer and indeed close friend to the liberal candidate for Florida's governorship, Andrew Gillum, claiming, if you can believe it, that Florida is a, quote, effed up cracker state. For our European audience, if you're not familiar with it, cracker is a pejorative for white people, okay? Now, this friend and staffer went on to say that the Gillum campaign was appealing to white guilt as a way of getting him elected. He admitted that Gillum is a hardcore secular progressive. He calls him actually part of the crazy crazies, but that Gillum has no intention of actually following through with any of his campaign promises to the poor and the destitute in Florida's inner cities. He just tells them what they want to hear, but he's gonna go with the whole corporatist globalist model of governing. Now, of course, with the release of this video, the Florida governorship, along with the Arizona Senate campaign, and O'Keefe did something similar to the Democrat Claire McCaskill in Missouri. These videos are throwing these races completely into disarray. I have a feeling that Gillum is done, as well as Sinema in Arizona, McCaskill in Missouri. When you combine this with the early voting trends that we've been seeing of late that have overwhelmingly favored the Republicans, I doubt very much that they're going to be able to politically survive this. But if there's going to be a real political fallout from these blatantly racist comments coming from Gillum's friend and staffer, if there's significant political fallout, you can be sure that it won't be the result of any outcry in the least from the likes of CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times demanding that Gillum come out and answer for this and deliberately and publicly distance himself from such blatant racism, pure unadulterated racism and racist rhetoric from the likes of his campaign longtime friend and high-ranking staffer. No, I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. This is the whole reason why Project Veritas exists in the first place. Expose the blatant hypocrisy and nonsense going on in the Democratic Party that the corporatist globalist media refuses to cover or even acknowledge. Again, can you imagine if comparable derogatory comments were made against blacks by a Republican high-ranking staffer? Can you even imagine what the reaction would be like? You see, the reason for this complete and total discrepancy, this asymmetrical approach to racial relations and rhetoric that's so evident among the corporatist globalist media is that as corporatist globalists, they've embraced as normative, indeed as ethically evolved and morally superior, the whole notion of what's technically referred to as emancipatory politics. It's better known as cultural Marxism. That's at least the way it's being practiced and promoted on our college campuses. Professor Jordan Peterson, I'm sure you all know, who's been brilliant in exposing the left-wing radical professors and policies of cultural Marxism on our college campuses. Emancipatory politics is a globalist-inspired political idea that re-envisions the state as a grand liberator of individuals from traditions and customs now deemed oppressive and discriminatory. And so in the 1960s, a new racial logic emerged from this emancipatory politics that simply didn't exist prior to our national politics, prior to the 1960s in our national politics. And that's where they reimagined culture as a binary of antithetical power distributions between a dominant colonialist power, often labeled white, that disenfranchise politically and socially minority cultures through racist and, of course, sexist and classist and even hetero-based exclusions. And so the whole notion of racism was itself reimagined as something that applied only to those who have the power to dominate. And so you actually have affirmative action officers openly saying that only whites can be racists, since whites dominate and control the institutions that create and enforce their own cultural norms and values. Blacks have no such access to the kind of power by which they can enforce any prejudice they may have, and so by definition, they cannot be racist. This is what's known as the power plus prejudice definition of racism, and it's the one that has up to now utterly dominated our national discourse, again, primarily among our globalist elites, our political, economic, educational, and media elites. This is why minorities are allowed to call the majority population whatever pejorative, whatever racist insult that they want. Since such racist rhetoric is simply an expression, it's a symbol of the unjust social oppression that they experience every day at the hands of culturally dominant groups. It's a perfectly legitimate expression of just outrage over the injustice of social oppression. However, whenever so-called culturally dominant groups, white privilege groups, right, use a rhetoric that's derogatory towards the now officially victimized minority identities, well, that's an expression, that's a symbol of their wicked and unjust cultural dominance and social discrimination. You see, cultural Marxism, or more technically emancipatory politics, explains why it is that one group is allowed to use language that has been barred and disallowed by our globalist elite from the other group. Another way of looking at it is that one use of derogatory language coming from the political left is an expression of the hope of a just future in light of their justified rage against the present and the past, whereas the other use of derogatory language coming from the political right, well, that's an expression of the hate that has marked both the past and the present, you see. This is why you simply will not see so much as a whimper of a call for the Democrat Gillum to distance himself from his friend and Stafford, let alone drop out of the race. It's the same reason you didn't see any major concern over Barack Obama's relationship with the radical anti-Semite Louis Farrakhan or Obama's incessantly racist pastor Jeremiah Wright. Now, I think the very encouraging news in all of this is that there does seem to be the makings of a racial paradigm shift going on in the states as we speak. Polls have found that upwards of 30% of blacks approve of President Trump's performance, which is an astonishing, absolutely astonishing number. Remember that blacks are the single most reliable and monolithic Democratic constituency, voting at national average about 95% Democratic. So a 30% approval rating for a Republican president it's just utterly substantial. Now, this is coming at a time when black support for the Democratic Party has been sliding dangerously low of late. A relatively recent Zogby survey found that black support for the Democrats was down 20% since January of this year. By the way, this also explains why the corporatist globalist media constantly harps on Trump's supposed racism. It's their way of trying to use fear and intimidation to keep blacks voting Democrat. That's essential for us to get. The constant claim that Trump is a racist and fuels racist hatreds comes from a deliberate attempt by the Democrat-dominated media to keep together the various racial identities that form the current cultural Marxist coalition within the Democratic Party. That really is the reason for it. It's the use of fear and intimidation to manipulate people to do what elite corporatist globalists want them to do. Well, again, the good news is that as we're seeing with the walk away movement, This approach to keeping the cultural Marxist coalition together is collapsing. More and more people are realizing that the Democrats and their propaganda wing in the corporatist globalist media are indeed trying to manipulate and coerce them through fear and intimidation. And more people are quite literally walking away from the Democratic Party. I don't see, frankly, much of a future for emancipatory politics. It's collapsing all over the West, everywhere it's being tried. And so I think it's only a matter of time before it collapses here in the United States as well. So don't forget to click on that link below. Get your copy of my book, President Trump and Our Post-Secular Future, for only 99 cents for a limited time. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Click on that Patreon link below. Become a monthly supporter of this channel and help us to continue to analyze current events in light of awesome conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish.